Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. Indrani Mukherjee. Today we are going to discuss the module Evolutionism under the paper Theories and Methods in Social Cultural Anthropology. So students, in this module we are going to learn about the evolutionary school of thought, the main proponents of the evolutionary school of thought, the criticism of the evolutionary school of thought, and the significance of the evolutionary school of thought. The evolutionary school of thought is of critical importance to theories in social anthropology because it was one of the first theories which was propounded in the theories to come. It started as the Western world started exploring different parts of the globe. Evolution refers to the concrete stages which are both unique in character and identity, as well as carry forward the essence of the previous stage. It speaks of both continuity and change in a progressive manner. The previous stage is the link which provides the basis of substantiating and establishing the logic of the present stage. It moves from simple to complex, from similar to diversified, and from homogeneous to heterogeneous. In academics, and especially in relevance with anthropology, it is essentially important to recognize biological evolution and cultural evolution for their meaning, relationship, and continuity. Biological evolution speaks of developmental stages within living organisms in a chronological manner. It orients itself to a standardized scheme of recording and classification, branching into various evolutionary categories from simple to complex, and from unicellular organisms to higher order primates and human beings. Culture is recognized as being unique to man. Thus, the concept of cultural evolution begins with the existence of man. One of the first scholars who attempted to define culture was E.B. Tylor in his book Primitive Culture. Research into the development of mythology, philosophy, religion, language, art, and customs, he defines culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habit acquired by man as a member of the society. However, some branches of anthropology also look into primate behavior, as it is believed that number of primates exhibit traits of culture in various aspects of social life. The concept of biological evolution and cultural evolution, or Darwinism and social Darwinism, found genesis in the academic world at almost the same time. While it is often believed that some concepts of cultural evolution borrowed from the idea of biological evolution, Darwin's book Origin of Species was published in 1859, and cultural evolutionists published their scripts between 1861 and 1865. Thus, in all probabilities, both the biological evolutionists and the cultural evolutionists were penning their text at the same time and were simply parallel thinkers. At this point of time, the Western world, which had been exploring unknown territories, started receiving information about societies which were very different from the Western society. This difference in types of society and the attempt to understand the diversity among the people of the world put forth a political as well as a scientific puzzle in front of the Western world. Evolutionism developed in order to try and find answers to this diverse plethora of cultures found all around the globe. The evolutionary school of thought arouses an explanation of diversity among societies. The evolutionists based their theorization on the method of reconstruction, also understood as historical method. The historical method utilized historical cases to illustrate that human society undergoes progressive and culminative cultural changes. It also utilized comparative method of research looking at different aspects of culture. They either looked at separate cultural traits like marriage, law, religion, and stipulated their progression over time, or they considered culture in its totality and spoke of its developmental stages. Thus, cultural evolution spoke of successive forms in socio-cultural institutions or culture as a whole, developed and accumulated to establish the growth of culture in a continuous sequence over different period of time. Evolutionists postulated that the difference in the societies can be explained through the understanding that different contemporary societies are at different stages of cultural evolution. It was believed that all societies pass through the same successive stages to develop in continuity to reach a common end. Thus, this school of thought propagated the idea of unilinear cultural evolution or a single line of evolution. The societies being discovered were often isolated and very closely dependent on nature for their everyday needs. They were referred to as primitive or savage by the Westerners, who were the conquerors of these territories. These societies were looked at as an oddity, and the writings that followed highlighted as well as romanticized cultural practices that were found in the foreign land. Thus, the discipline of anthropology found its genesis within the information of these societies, which were essentially recorded in the travelogues and personal notes and diaries of explorers or through writings of missionaries. The evolutionary theorists did not visit the societies by themselves, but rather they based their theorizations on writings available to them. As the writings were by people who were not familiar with the society that they wrote about, they took a superior and judgmental note about the cultural traits. Similarly, the evolutionary theorists also put themselves at the pinnacle of contemporary stage of evolution and fit the other societies at the lower rungs in accordance with their logical explanation of social progression. In spite of this, the fact that evolutionary theorists conceptualized the Western world as superior in terms of cultural evolution, they spoke of psychic unity of man, which said that human mind everywhere would think alike, or more specifically, that under the similar environmental condition, the society of the worlds progress in similar ways due to commonality of thought. Carrying this idea forward, Tyler specifies that the difference between cultures were those of development rather than of origin, rather of degree than of kind. This was used to explain how cultural patterns, as well as societies, which are geographically isolated from each other and genetically unrelated, still tend to pass through parallel sequences of similar stages of development. Examples were drawn from cultural similarities like practices of settled agriculture in different geographical locations, or the fact that zero was invented by the Mayan, the Babylonian, and the Hindu culture simultaneously. It was said that some form of psychic unity is implied whenever there is an emphasis on parallel evolution, for if the different peoples of the world advance through similar sequences, it must be assumed that they all began with essentially similar psychological potential. The main proponents of evolutionary school of thought can be divided into three groups: the British Evolutionary School, the American Evolutionary School, and the German Evolutionary School, as has been presented in the flowchart. The main thinkers of the British Evolutionary School were Sir E.B. Tylor, John McLennan, Sir Henry James Maine, Sir John Lubbock, Sir James George Fraser. The American Evolutionary School was essentially spearheaded by Lewis Henry Morgan. The German Evolutionary School consisted of John Birkhoffen and Adolf Bastianini. The evolutionary schools are divided as such because of the geographical location of the thinkers. Most scholars belonging to the evolutionary school of thought were in agreement with the unilinear cultural evolution. They differed in the specificity of their area of study and the logical sequence of development that they proposed. Though the theorists supported each other in the generality of thought, they also criticized each other and were at times even opposed to the proposed developmental sequence when it came to the specifics. Of the various thinkers that have been spoken about, we shall now discuss two main proponents of the evolutionary school of thought: Sir E.B. Tylor from the British School of Thought and Lewis Henry Morgan from the American School of Thought. Sir E.B. Tylor, who was also known as the founder of comparative ethnology, helped in establishing anthropology as an independent scientific discipline in Europe. His interest in anthropology arose from his association with archaeologist Henry Christie and his keen sense of observation and comparative analysis. Tylor constructed the chronological sequence of cultural evolution based on both material culture as well as non-material culture. He reconstructed material culture by studying archaeological excavation sites using surviving material relic artifacts as markers of culture, and put forth developmental stages of mankind as the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. Similarly, Tylor also studied surviving social traits that might not be relevant at a point of time but had been carried forward from previous generations, and after comparing both material and non-material survivals, he constructed three successive developmental stages of society as savagery, barbarism, and civilization. He, however, did not try to fit any societies into these categories. In spite of writing about a number of cultural institutions, Tyler's most comprehensive work was of primitive religion. He pointed out that religion is universal to all cultures. According to him, religion originated as the belief of soul or anima, which he termed as animism. Tyler believed that primitive man, who he referred to as a savage philosopher, believed in the existence of soul or spirit. It was believed that when a man is alive, he is possessed or is in possession of a spirit which enables it to speak, walk, eat, talk, breathe, etc. When the spirit leaves the man's body, he dies. The genesis of religion, according to Tyler, was based on this ideology and the worship of the soul or spirit. Further, as time passed, this phenomenon led to ancestral worship and the appeasement of different spirits at different occasions, leading to polytheism. However, Tyler sees the practice of monotheism or one God as the final stage of evolution of religion and placed it at the pinnacle of the developmental stages. Thus, according to Tyler, religion progressed from animism through polytheism to monotheism. He further associated animism to savagery, polytheism to barbarism, and monotheism to civilization. Louis Henry Morgan is known as the father of American anthropology. He reiterated the idea of psychic unity of man by referring to it as the germ idea possessed by man, which served as the basis of parallel development of socio-cultural patterns. Morgan studied social structure and material culture and based his concept of evolutionary progression on the influence of technology on development. Like Tyler, Morgan adopted Montesquieu's categories of savagery, barbarism, and civilization for his theorizations of progression of society. However, Morgan subdivided savagery barbarism into three more stages: lower, middle, and upper. But unlike Tyler, he stipulated contemporary ethnographic examples for each stage. Morgan's evolutionary scheme of society has been presented in the table below. Lower savagery was represented by the invention of speech and subsistence on fruit and nuts. Middle savagery on fish and use of fire. Upper savagery spoke of the use of bow and arrow. During lower barbarism, there was pottery. Middle barbarism saw the domestication of animals, agriculture with irrigation, and stone and brick buildings. Upper barbarism saw iron smelting and the use of iron tools. Civilization was marked by the use of phonetic alphabets and writing. Morgan also worked on marriage, kinship, and systems of consanguinity and affinity. He constructed a 7-page questionnaire containing more than 200 questions. These questionnaires were mailed to foreign missions and diplomatic representatives of United States all over the world to acquire comparative information about different societies. Not all questionnaires were answered, but the information that was provided from India, which was in Tamil, being specifically from Tamil Nadu, and its similarities with the identification of kin relations encouraged Morgan to reinforce his hypothesis that American Indian tribes were of Asiatic origin. Morgan also established evolutionary sequences for family organization, socio-political organization, descent pattern, and rules of inheritance of property. Other than Tyler and Morgan, who were prominent proponents of the evolutionist school of thought, let me also tell you about Johann Beethoven from the German school of thought. Beethoven developed a theory of evolution of kinship systems. He studied Greek classical writings and ethnographic literature, in which he observed that in early societies, children were often named after their mothers, a situation that he found remained true to other existing non-literate societies. Thus, he propounded that matriarchy precedes patriarchy. According to Beethoven, the earliest form of society was represented by sexual promiscuity, which was the reason why children were associated with their mother's name, giving rise to a matrilineal society. This was followed by women amassing authority in the society, giving way to a matriarchal system with a stage of Amazonian assertiveness. Beethoven supported the assumption with examples of female deities and lunar calendar representative of the menstrual cycle. He believed that over a period of time, women got tired of the authority and wanted to be looked after by their husbands, while men tried to create greater relevance in the process of childbearing through customs like Kuwait, which is fathers taking to bed with sympathetic childbirthing pain. Once men and women found an equal status with respect to childbirth, men started gaining greater relevance in lineage, leading to society recognizing patrilineage and subsequently giving rise to patriarchy. The criticism of evolutionary school of thought. One of the main criticisms of evolutionary school of thought was that they utilized the writings of explorers and missionaries for their evolutionary scheme. And whenever data was not available, they utilized culture survivals to fill the gap in the sequence. Most of the writings that the evolutionists relied on was by people who were not trained to collect ethnographic data. As the evolutionists relied on a lot of secondary literature instead of primary fieldwork conducted by themselves, they are often referred to as armchair anthropologists. The writings of explorers and missionaries that were relied on presented a romanticized picture of the communities, bringing out what the Westerners considered as queer or unnatural or backward. The scheme of evolution itself put the Western world at the top of the evolutionary ladder using derogatory terms like savagery or barbaric for other communities. The evolutionists were criticized for being racist in nature. Further, evolutionists believe that similarity of cultural traits between geographically separated areas is due to similar causes, while there were available examples where a number of different cultures had originated within the same geographical area. Thus, negating the similar causes would give rise to just one kind of response. Evolutionists were criticized for looking at societal change from just one point of view, not taking into consideration the influence of the important discoveries and inventions, diffusion, or migration. In spite of all these criticisms, one can never underplay the significance of the evolutionary school of thought in anthropology. The significance of evolutionary school of thought. The discipline of anthropology took shape for the first time under the evolutionary school of thought. Oxford University, London, recognized it as a separate discipline exploring the science of culture in 1884 under the patronage of Sir E. B. Tylor. The active discourse and criticism of evolutionary school of thought led to the development of other schools of thought. The significance of conducting scientific fieldwork came into focus. The significance of formulating and conducting scientific study of different community was recognized, and anthropologists actively trained to study society for not just social traits but their social logic within the cultural context. So, students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. The evolutionary school of thought arouses an explanation for diversity among societies. The evolutionists based their theorization on the reconstruction of the evolutionary sequence of society and cultural traits based on historical method and comparative method. They propagated the idea of unilinear cultural evolution or a single line of evolution due to psychic unity of man. It was believed that cultural patterns as well as societies which are geographically isolated from each other and genetically unrelated tend to pass through parallel sequences of similar stages of development. It was thus explained that societies are different from each other as they are at different stages of social evolution. The main proponents of evolutionary school of thought were Sir E. B. Tylor and Louis Henry Morgan. Other thinkers like John McLennan, Henry Maine, Sir John Lubbock, Sir James George Fraser, Johann Bukofen, and Bastian were all people who contributed towards evolutionary thought. Evolutionists were criticized for looking at societal change from just one point of view, not taking into consideration the influence of important discoveries and inventions, diffusion, and migration. However, the active discourse and criticism of evolutionary school of thought led to the development and establishment of anthropology as a discipline. Thank you.